I always dread following Sue Essex. I find the situation ironic. I had a phone call from Sue Essex a year ago, and I've got to say it's always confusing when you get a phone call from Sue Essex, because Sue doesn't know this. The Assembly, being as bloody tight as they are, passed her phone when she left from the Assembly to Jocelyn Davis. So every time Jocelyn rings me, it comes up as Sue Essex. And it is very confusing. But I had a phone call from Sue Essex about a year ago which said something along the lines of, Steve, I've been asked to do a little project. And I thought, right. So she said, oh, just have a quick look at regulation in the RSL sector. And I spoke to her about it, and I put the phone down, and then I shouted to my secretary, Sue, I said, Sue Essex has been tasked to reform the housing market in Wales. And you knew that Sue wouldn't just confine herself to that. I want to today pick up on some of the themes and yet look at the local government angle on this. I think that's key. Thank you for the very warm introduction, Councillor Roberts. £5 in a brown envelope to you. I take my theme today, and spookily I just went to the toilet and this was playing. From the R.E.M. song written by Michael Stipe, It's the End of the World We Know It and I Feel Fine. And there is a little bit of that. I mean, I've been reading some articles recently, and there's a bit of schadenfreude going on about the housing market. There's some very learned commentators, reading Hamish McRae the other day, and Simon Jenkins, are all saying it needed to happen, don't worry about it too much. Well, we've got to worry about it a lot. I mean, we're talking about people's lives, we're talking about impacts, and I think the situation is incredibly serious, and as a result of that, I think we have to try and cushion our communities in Wales. If I can take that. Yeah, let me say publicly, WLGA, we warmly welcome the publication of the Essex report and the extensive dialogue that we have with Jocelyn Davis. Aled and myself met Jocelyn again the other week, and the dialogue is occurring and it's good. It's about good government. It feels like a report with the Heineken factor. It might get into those parts where other reports haven't got. Yet there are plenty of reports. I've got one underneath my desk which stops it rocking. There are plenty of reports which have gone nowhere. This feels like something a bit special. It dovetails into the Making the Connections agenda. We worked with Sue for a number of years on Making the Connections, and it has been an agenda embraced by local government. It recognises that growing partnership we have with the housing associations, a great friend Nick Bennett, and I think we want to deepen that. And I want to major on this today. It takes forward that strategic housing role for local government. We've talked about a strategic housing role, and I've been to conferences actually on the strategic housing role, and I've come away never knowing quite what it is. I'm starting to understand it a little bit, and I think I understand it more in the current environment, and it might give new meaning to community leadership. And the key focus, and let's be frank, for all of us in the room, is now about delivery. Anything else in the current environment is a distraction. I don't know if you've been following the money markets this morning. I don't know if anybody got access to the internet, but I can inform you today that the credit crunch is actually worse than you think it is. And I do have some shock economic news today. So we go back. Look, you won't even stay on it. It's shocking new evidence that the economic situation is much worse than we thought. I'll move on to the next slide because it clearly wants to go there. I'm a man obviously who moves in very high circles. I had lunch, I had a meal the other evening with Michael Rake, who's the chair of BT. He's one of those, Tom Wolfe Masters of the Universe type characters. He's been in New York on the weekend, negotiating. He sits on Barclays Bank's board, and he's been in New York on the weekend negotiating, a partial takeover of Lehman Brothers. And I don't know what the hell he was talking about after the time. And it's interesting how mad this situation has become. I mean, Noel Gallagher was on the radio the other day, really happy about the takeover of Manchester City, and saying that every time you buy a litre of oil, you put in, a Manchester United supporter is now putting money into the coffers of Manchester City. Well, as of last night, the US taxpayer is now the main sponsor of Manchester United. We saw, and this is a quote from Mike Riggs, I don't know if it's true, but it sort of shows the scale of the problem. The market value of Persimmon in 2007 is now equivalent to the total market value of the 5 biggest housing companies today. That's the scale of the drop. Morgan Stanley, who are currently under attack from hedge funds, think there could be 25% decline in house values in 2 years. The FSA, the FSA says 1 million people face losing their homes in the next 18 months. UK house prices have been running at nearly 8 times average earnings against an historic average of 3.5, and mortgage approvals are down by 70% on last year. It's all bad news. And the quote at the top is of course from the billionaire financer Warren Buffett. 5 years ago, derivatives are the financial weapons of mass destruction. Let's get back down onto planet Earth. Our key concerns in the current environment are twofold. We want to work with you in the Assembly, in housing associations, with the private sector to keep families in their homes. I think that's the absolute key starting point for us. We want also to provide affordable housing. We've put some quick wins forward, and I'll read them out. We want to see provision of good quality financial advice extended across Wales to stop repossessions or prevent repossessions, and to assist those in terms of mortgage rescue initiatives. That advice is absolutely key, I think, and we've got to professionalise that advice. I think we have great relationships with the CAB, Consumer Direct, and a range of other people, but those advice services are going to be put under strain shortly. We need, and we've been talking with Nick and his colleagues about the purchase of existing properties and land where this meets need. We think that we should bring forward future social housing grant funding to allow the above to happen. Why are we talking about it in a yearly context? Why don't we think more strategically in that regard? You've talked already about the land protocols. We need to develop an evidence base. How bad is it? We need more expertise, I think, on housing finance as well. And looking at the SSG programme so it addresses local priorities. Now, going to that point about Sue's emphasis on the strategic housing role, well, what does it mean for local government? This is where I think I start to see it. I mean, we know in the current environment that individuals could end up in some very severe debt, may fail to pay the council tax, their rents and everything else. How do we reconcile what we do in community leadership terms, in terms of anti-poverty, with our statutory responsibilities? Does central government want us to pursue rent arrears in the way that we've done in the past? Do you want us to enforce some of the performance measures which mitigate against anti-poverty? Are we going to have a proper debate about those sorts of things? Are we going to say, there's rules and regulations, and there's a crisis, and there's a time to deal with the measures within the crisis? Trading standards have mentioned advice services. Housing, we could see a lot more presentations in terms of homelessness. What about social services? One of our largest functions, many retired people actually rely on the equity in the house as provision for care, care homes and social care provision. If this decreases, what does it mean? There'll be more demand on social care services, and this could also take up the impact of benefits and state pension provision. All these knock-on effects, local authorities need to think about what that means, and we need to think about it in a wider context.